Hello everyone, it's so nice to be here with you again this year. I was really counting on the travel bubble between Hong Kong and Singapore and actually be there in person. But nonetheless, I'm glad that I can still be here with you this year. I'm sure that most of you will relate when I say that the last 10 months have not been easy. They definitely have not been easy for me. As we sit here today, our world is facing unprecedented crises, from environmental to social, and now the COVID-19 pandemic. Even prior to COVID-19, most of the world's largest economies were already underway to face a serious workforce crisis. We were discussing this exactly last year at this very same conference. What has happened so far in 2020 has fast-tracked this disruption. Aside from destroying the livelihood of people all across the world, COVID-19 has unleashed a worldwide economic pandemonium, which is still unraveling, and the impact on the future of work is greater than any of us can even imagine. Many industries, retail, travel, hospitality, to name a few, have sustained lasting damages and will have to reinvent themselves in order to survive. Many of the jobs that were already at risk of becoming obsolete due to digitalization will be permanently wiped out, and hundreds of millions of workers will have no choice but learn new skills and join new sectors. While all this should be bringing us closer together, we're more polarized than ever. We see it all around us. Old versus new, experience versus ambition, knowledge versus vision, traditional versus new age mindset, realism versus idealism, conservative versus liberal. This lack of cohesion is clearly reflected in the workplace, with baby boomers and Gen X, the older generations, on one side, and millennials and Gen Z, the youngest ones, on the other. Yet, I believe that it has never been as important as it is right now to harness the power of a collective strength. And it is not just about talent, it's not just about recruiting. Yes, it is true that the future will require a much more calculated, flexible, and sensible approach to recruiting, employing, developing, reskilling, and upskilling people. But I really believe that the pivotal role in turning this humanitarian crisis into an opportunity will be played by the new generations working hand in hand with the older generations to chart a much more positive trajectory and solve many of the interconnected problems that we will increasingly be facing. I believe that intergenerational collaboration is the key to saving the world. This is what led me to write a book, Reframing Generational Stereotypes, published by McGraw-Hill. Bringing together 4, sometimes 5 generations in the workplace, however, it is not easy. Especially with generations that have no context about one another, that really have little understanding of the forces that have shaped each other. I've been working with companies for so many years, helping them bridge the generational divide, and every time I feel like a couples therapist. There is so much confusion, there is so much misunderstanding, but in reality we have so much more in common than we realize. And the work environment is paramount to bringing this out. Organizations must help bridge the generational divide by creating a culture of understanding, by giving employees an opportunity to really learn about one another. Sadly, generational differences are often overlooked, buried under the sand, or simply ignored. I've been reading more and more articles about people saying that generations don't exist, that generational differences are not real, but they are, and they will now play a major part in either stagnating progress or catalyzing change. Because our world is in desperate need of both the experience and the knowledge of the older generations and the energy and the social mindedness of today's youth. As Harvey Allen wisely said, every new generation is a fresh invasion of savages. So let's take a quick look at Gen Z, the new kids on the block. Gen Z, they demand change. We read about their activism in the news every day, from Greta Thunberg's school strike for climate action movement or Black Lives Matters. More and more young people around the world are rising together behind a social cause. Gen Z is very aware that humanity is facing significant global issues, and they feel a sense of responsibility to fix what's broken. Much like millennials 15 years ago with work environment and culture, Gen Z will be driving the next big shift, and it will be related to purpose and impact. Gen Z don't believe that corporate social responsibility is a genuine commitment on the part of an organization to do good, but just a big tax deductible with huge PR upside. They don't believe that they can change the world by working for the corporate sector, which is why many of them want to take matters into their own hands. When we look at research all over the world, we see that more and more Gen Z want to start their own company. 66% of them, and as many as 89% in countries like Indonesia, primarily because they want to make an impact. 60% want their future career to change the world for good. Gen Z is also redefining consumer power. I'm sure you guys have heard the terms ethical consumerism many times. Gen Z believe that they can make a much bigger contribution or change through the products they buy as opposed to the people they vote for. So really they can make or break a brand simply by choosing to buy or not buy products that are produced by this brand. We're seeing more and more organizations, Amazon and Unilever as of late, who are more and more committed to a sustainable future, and this is definitely going to help them attract the right talent going forward. And even those Gen Z who choose corporate employment, they want organizations who have purpose threaded within the DNA, and they hold them accountable for bringing about the change that they advocate. 91% of Gen Z students that I have surveyed in my recent study, the multi-generational workforce study, say that the ability to drive social impact is important when considering their future career or their future employer, particularly to address issues such as inequality, education, poverty, sustainability, or climate change. Organizations must think about their purpose. They must have solid answer for when the talent of tomorrow is going to ask you, how is it that I can contribute to the world or make a world a better place by working for your organization? And if you don't have an answer, you're not likely to attract them. As they enter the workplace, they will expect to be able to make significant contributions in a very short period of time by exploring new ways of thinking, new ways of working, and new ways of addressing problems. Baby boomers and Gen X, however, are seen by this group of youngsters as more resistant to change, with a tendency to rely more on their past experiences, frequently trying to tame Gen Z's need for change instead of enabling it. The older generations, on the other hand, often complain about Gen Z's lack of maturity, knowledge, discipline, patience, and focus, alongside the lack of respect and appreciation that they seem to show for those with many more years under their belt. Poor communication, combined with conflicting expectations, can be a real source of tension between generations and lead to a series of seemingly unsurmountable intergenerational conflicts in the workplace that not only hurt companies' ability to attract, recruit, and retain the right talent, but also hinder the opportunity to leverage on each generation's unique strengths to drive impact and innovation. For this reason, few believe that generational diversity makes the workplace more productive. When we look at the workforce, 59% of baby boomers, 66% of Gen X, and even less, 43% of millennials and 40% of Gen Z said that they believe a multi-generational workplace makes the workplace more productive. I was talking recently to a millennial from Hong Kong, and he said a workplace with different generations is less productive because they aren't able to make a consensual decision or respect each other. An example is "okay boomer." I'm sure you guys have heard it, a viral slang phrase that is used to dismiss out of touch or close-minded opinions associated with the baby boomer generation or older people more generally. Baby boomers countered by accusing young people of making assumptions about them based on age and not taking the time to engage before forming an opinion. As a wise man once said, his name is George Orwell, every generation imagines itself to be more intelligent than the one that went before it and wiser than the one that comes after it. So this is really at the heart of the conflicts between generations. So, while according to a 2019 New York Times article, OK Boomer marks the end of friendly generational relations, I believe that it represents a unique opportunity to finally address the elephant in the room, take a step back, and look with fresh eyes at one another so that we can rewire, reframe, and contextualize some of the behaviors, the perceptions, and the biases that have prevented us from truly bonding. So let's take a quick look at the origins of some of these intergenerational conflicts. 2/3 of employees across generations find it hard to work with other age groups. Now, let's address the elephant in the room and let's look at why. So when I asked talent and employees across organizations, including Hong Kong, what they think is the biggest challenge they're experiencing when working with baby boomers, the main answers are hierarchical, they are too stubborn, they're resistant to change, and they lack empathy. When I ask them what the challenge is working with Gen X, my generation, they say that we're too demanding, we're too individualistic, we think we know it all, and we're too distrustful and don't really connect on a deeper level. And when it comes to millennial, the challenge the workforce is experiencing with them is that they are unreliable, they're seen as being detached from work, overconfident, and have this feeling of being entitled. And Gen Z, on the other hand, that they're inexperienced, that they are easily bored, that they lack focus, and of course, that they don't know hardship, which is what every generation heard from the previous generation. So different mindsets, different communication styles, different forces that shape them, but all these generations have one thing in common. They all feel misunderstood. 1 of 2 employees in the workforce is intimidated by other generations. When I asked what challenges they face as a baby boomer or as a Gen X or as a millennial or as a Gen Z, this is what they said. Baby boomers said that every day they face challenges when it comes to overcoming old mental models, the belief of others that their ideas are out of date. They're afraid of being treated as a fixed asset, and also the fact that they don't learn as fast as the younger generations. Gen X also has a series of challenges they face every day. One of them is staying relevant. Many of them say they're approaching a new age bracket and they're worried about what implication that has and ageism. They also say that they're challenged with lack of visibility. Being the smallest generation in the workforce, they don't get enough airtime, they don't get enough attention from the younger or the older generations. And then of course, being on the cusp, they feel that they are too old for the young generations and yet still too young for executive management. Millennials, as confident as they seem, they also have their own challenges. Getting their point across is an issue for them. Feeling sandwiched between generations now that Gen Z is actually on its way into the workforce. Balancing work and family while still building financial stability, and also dealing with institutional power. And Gen Z, finally, the new generation coming into the workforce, they're seriously worried about being underestimated. They are concerned about the perception that people have that they are spoon-fed, that they're spoiled, that they're impatient, calling them strawberries or snowflakes. They're worried about having limited opportunities. They also say that they have a big source of anxiety coming from the fact that they know the future depends on them, but they feel nobody is listening. According to HR professionals and leaders, all of these confusions, all of these fears, all of these worries actually cause a series of significant challenges within the workplace. When I asked 250 HR professionals what these are, and business leaders, they say lack of cohesion, discord among workers, unhealthy competition, lack of mutual respect, low employee engagement, slow-moving projects, technology adoption that is also slow, and lack of teamwork. So these are all things that happen as a result of these fears, of these misunderstandings, of these concerns that the multi-generational workforce is experiencing. But not only, all of these things together, they also impact companies' ability to hire the right talent, to retain the right talent, to build a strong employer brand. And since the topic of today is positive change, most importantly, they hinder a company's ability to drive innovation and drive positive change. Now, what is the good news? Because there are a lot of good news as well. So when I went out and surveyed thousands of professionals and from all over the world about what they're experiencing in the workforce, 99% of them said that they actually do want to work with each other. And this is consistent across baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. And there's so many positive things that they actually share about one another. So when I asked the other generations, what are the strongest things that each generation exhibits that is very needed? The other generation said that baby boomers are very experienced, that they're very knowledgeable, that they're hardworking, that they're extremely wise. Gen X is seen as extremely independent, resourceful, sensible, and big problem solvers. Millennials are seen as being creative, as being innovative, tech-savvy, and open-minded. And finally, Gen Z, the newcomers, are idealists, and we need that idealism. They're digital natives, they're impact-driven, and they're very, very fast learners. So, the other good news as well is that there is so much that these generations openly admit to wanting to learn from each other. I actually asked what is the number one thing you believe you can learn from the younger generations, and what is the thing that you believe the younger generations can learn from you. And when it comes to Gen Z and millennials, the younger generations, when it comes to baby boomers, they want to learn the art of negotiation. They'd like to learn from them about work ethics, about leadership, about networking, about strategic thinking. And what they would like to learn from Gen X is courage. They see Gen X as being particularly courageous, soft skills, attention to details, and organizational politics, but also professional conduct. And then Gen X say that they would like to learn from the young generations digital, collaboration, confidence, openness, and also caring for the environment and doing something about it. And baby boomers, the oldest generation in the workplace, if you don't count the traditionalists, they say that what they would really like to learn from the new generations is technology, new age thinking, multitasking, creative thinking, and work-life balance, which is something that they are more and more interested in embracing for themselves. So, how can organizations address this challenge and bridge this generational divide? The first step, and the most important, is to acknowledge that generational diversity is diversity. Intergenerational conflicts are very real. Frictions between generations stem from a profound lack of contextual knowledge and understanding of one another. The young employees, begrudge the older ones, and the older ones begrudge the younger ones because they genuinely do not understand the forces, the political context, the historical context, the cultural context that shapes their behaviors, their mindsets, and their way of thinking. I was talking to one millennial recently from Hong Kong who told me that he believes the one way to address generational differences is self-awareness and tons of curiosity. He said, genuinely understanding ourselves first, our own experiences, our own biases, and the lenses by which we see the world. And then we need to become curious about the lenses and the experiences of others. And then, of course, orchestrate all of these with a servant leadership perspective. I am in service of the group is in service of the challenge. And this is a mentality that our world will really need going forward, especially now. So here's the thing. Generational diversity needs to become a key item on every organization's diversity and inclusion agendas. The opposite is not an option. 89% of baby boomers, 87% of Gen X, 94% of millennials, and even more, 96% of Gen Z say that it is absolutely critical for them. But only 40% say that their organization is doing something about it. And this is very consistent with the data I got from the survey I ran with HR professionals, where only 25% of them say that their organization is strongly committed to generational diversity, and 34% say that they're not committed at all. So, while strong focus on generational diversity is not widespread yet, what is it that an organizations can do in order to be able to show their commitment towards intergenerational diversity and bring generations together? The first is they need to develop strategy, programs, and initiatives that help people learn about each other and from each other. The first step is to foster a culture of cross-generational awareness. Talks, workshops, coaching, CHRO or CEO roundtables, peer groups, even shared workspaces are a great opportunity for generations to intermingle and to bond and to learn to appreciate each other. Some companies have storytelling sessions, cross-generational curated conversations, and speed mentoring. So these are all a series of programs and initiatives that really do help and create broader awareness around the topic and initial understanding of one another. The second, of course, is to build emotional connections through joint socials, opportunities for people to learn about each other outside of work. I was talking recently to a number of organizations, and I shared all these examples in my book. But City Generations Network, for example, here in Hong Kong, they have a series of really cool initiatives like Workout with Cirque du Soleil acrobats, followed by behind-the-scene Q&As by the acrobat team. And this is an opportunity for all the different generations in the workplace to come together and to experience something that is that goes beyond work. The third step is to use collaborative decision-making as an opportunity to express mutual respect and inclusivity and set transparent performance criteria with fair evaluation. More and more companies are putting together teams that are non-hierarchical, where titles and seniority don't matter, where everybody works together and their roles are based on and responsibilities are based not on how many years of experience they have, but based on expertise. So where the young generation, for example, comes up up with simple solutions and problems, and the older generation, uses their experience and their knowledge of the organization to remove roadblocks and help, bring the solution forward. Next is not to underestimate the importance of manager-employee relationships. Choose people leaders wisely and train them to foster trust and collaboration among teams. Google and Procter & Gamble are two great examples of organizations that hold their people leaders accountable and help them become the best managers they can be. I've shared a lot of their stories in my book. And also prepare the young generation for leadership. They are the leaders of tomorrow. Focus on their potential instead of trying to mold them into the type of leader that you believe they should be. Empower them. Offer them a multi-dimensional path to leadership where they have the opportunity to explore themselves and the type of career that is best for them. And then have to empower them by giving them access to leadership and high impact projects. I was talking recently with Group M, and they have shadow boards. I don't know if you have heard about it, but basically they have a young committee that works side by side with the executive committee to solve organizational problems and challenges of strategic importance. And of create cross-generational learning opportunities. We have seen in earlier slides how much people really want to learn from one another. So reverse and two-way mentoring programs are great. Why not give our senior leaders the opportunity to be both mentor and mentee, and the same for our young generations? And finally, advocate and practice lifelong learning. In a culture where everyone is encouraged to learn, in a culture with growth mindset, nobody feels called out. And so the older generations are not going to feel intimidated to learn and reskill themselves because they're going to be working in an organization that promotes and encourages that type of mentality across the entire organization. So to wrap up, I want to say that while we should not downplay what is happening as a result of COVID-19, and instead we should show compassion for all those people whose livelihoods have or will be affected in the months to come. It is also true that through disruption comes opportunity for growth. And I want to believe in my heart that everything that has happened, as challenging as it is, it's meant to put us on a better path. And if we look closely, we will find that this pandemic has already brought some positive changes, particularly when it comes to the multi-generational workforce. For one, it forced the widespread adoption of technology and digital tools. Even the most resistant had to learn to embrace it, for organizations as a way to ensure their survival, and for employees their relevance in the workplace. It also forced industries and employees to reinvent themselves. And as difficult as things may seem right now, it is not necessarily only a bad thing. Organizations are given the opportunity to redefine their mission, embrace corporate citizenship, and align purpose and profit through sustainable profitability. And employees at the same time have the opportunity to rethink their career narrative and perhaps pursue opportunities that are more aligned with their mission in life. It also forced us to rethink the definition of leadership. Leaderships have had to manage employees undergoing entire different sets of challenges, as each of us faced our own unique reality during the lockdown. People that had kids or family to take care of while having a job, and people that faced loneliness or isolation. Managers have had to quickly learn empathy, flexibility, understanding, tolerance, leniency, all the while, of course, facing their own unique challenges. But it also forced companies to rethink the way they employ people. Up until today, we have been overpopulating urban areas to our detriment, because this is where most of us had to be to work. But if in the new normal, people will be able to work from anywhere, there will be no need to be in the big city. And I believe that in time, this would lead many to choose and even repopulate smaller towns, and perhaps even embrace a more simple lifestyle while still being able to excel at their job and have a fulfilling career. And from a multi-generational perspective, which is what is most relevant for us here today, it helped bridge the gap between generations. If you think about it, for the last 15 years, the youngest members of our workforce have been criticized for expecting the flexibility to work from anywhere, anytime. After the COVID-19 lockdown, many of us had the opportunity to realize that being able to work from home while multitasking is not only a privilege, but it is also a skill, and a very much needed one right now. At the same time, embracing technology and being seen in their own element has made older generations appear more approachable, without considering that even those who were resistant to flexible work arrangements have now had the opportunity to enjoy family, something that they most likely had to give up for most of their careers, and are unlikely to want to give that up again. But there is more that can and should be done. Like many of my peers, I came to terms with the fact that my generation will not be the one to change the world, unfortunately. But what Gen X can do is to guide Gen Z and hand in hand with millennials and baby boomers, enable them to drive impact and innovation. Because while it's perhaps true that millennials and Gen Z understand what is important to society at large, perhaps better than any of us, it is also undoubtedly true that they will need the support of baby boomers and Gen X, their experience and their knowledge, in order to turn their aspirations into reality. So at the end of the day, it is up to you, it is up to me, it is up to all of us to drive positive change.